You have probably met a Mennonite and never known it. She drove a car, wore ordinary clothes, taught your kids. But another kind of Mennonite woman in the plain and old order world lives by rules most of us could not keep for a morning. She will never cut her hair. She will never be photographed. She may never see her own face full length in a mirror. I was raised among these women and will show you their world from inside. Number 1 is the rule every other one is built on. Hit subscribe and let us begin. Number 16, the covering never comes off. From the morning she rises to the night she lies down, a plain Mennonite woman keeps her head covered. It is a small cap worn as a matter of faith, pinned over hair that is never shown in public. It comes from a passage most of the world has forgotten, the 11th chapter of 1 Corinthians, which tells a woman to cover her head when she prays. And since she is taught to pray without ceasing, the covering simply never leaves. Now here is where outsiders get us wrong. They lump us in with the Amish and picture one stiff white bonnet. But our coverings are often smaller, sometimes only a sheer little cap the size of a saucer, and the exact shape of it is a language. The width of the pleats, the color, the way the strings tie or do not tie, all of it tells another plain person which church she belongs to. How conservative her people are, sometimes whether she is married. A stranger sees a scrap of cloth. Another Mennonite reads her whole life in it. And I will tell you something that surprises people. In many Mennonite families, when the plain dress slowly relaxed over the years, the covering was the very last thing to go. It was the hill the grandmothers died on. A girl begins to wear it young, and in the strictest homes, she wears it into her coffin. It is the first thing you would notice about her and the last thing she would ever set aside. Number 15, the hair beneath it is never cut. Under that covering is hair that, in many cases, has never once met a pair of scissors. Not trimmed, not layered, not shaped, from the day she was born until the day she dies. It comes from that same chapter of 1 Corinthians, which calls a woman's long hair her glory, given to her as a covering of its own. So she grows it her whole life, parts it down the middle, and winds it into a tight bun that vanishes under the cap before she ever steps outside. Think of the length of it after 40, 50, 60 years of never being cut, hair well past the waist, wound up fresh every single morning and hidden again. And think of what that hair is. It is the one thing on her body she is allowed to consider beautiful, and even that she does not show the world. Her husband will see it down. Her daughters, brushing it out by lamplight and learning to pin their own, will see it. There is an intimacy in it the modern world does not really have a word for anymore, a beauty kept for exactly the people who love her and no one else. To the woman watching this from a salon chair, never cutting your hair sounds like something taken from you. To my grandmother, cutting it would have been the loss. She would have told you her hair was never hers to cut in the first place. Number 14, no makeup, no jewelry, not even a wedding ring. She wears nothing on her face and nothing on her hands. No paint, no polish, no earrings, no bracelet, and here is the one that stops people cold, no wedding ring. The rest of the world measures a marriage by the diamond a woman wears. These women wear no ring at all and count themselves no less married for it. The reason is a single word my people are raised inside of, demute, which means lowliness or humility. To decorate yourself, to draw the eye, to make people look, is understood as a doorway to pride. And pride is treated as the root that every other sin grows out of. So the plain woman removes the whole question before it can be asked. Nothing sparkles, nothing is added. An entire industry exists out there to sell a woman a better face than the one she woke up with. And she simply never buys a single thing it is selling, not once, not on her wedding day, not on the worst day of her life. On that wedding day, when the rest of the world puts a bride in white lace and jewels, she stands up in a plain dress with a bare face and bare hands and is married just the same. Some of you find that unbearably bleak. But sit with the other possibility for a second, because a woman who never once competes on her appearance also never once loses at it. And there are days most of us would trade almost anything for that. Number 13. The dress is plain and often made by her own hands. There is no closet of endless options and no scrolling for the next thing to buy. She wears a modest dress, frequently one she cut and sewed herself, in a style her church has quietly agreed upon. Many conservative groups wear what is called a cape dress, with an extra panel of fabric drawn over the bodice for modesty and an apron over that. There is no written rule book, only a shared and understood standard of what our people wear, passed from mother to daughter and enforced by nothing louder than belonging. The dress is long, the sleeves are modest, the fabric is simple. Now here is a real difference between us and the Amish that most outsiders never catch. Some conservative Mennonite churches allow a soft print or a color the Amish would never permit. So a Mennonite woman may have a little more room in her cloth, though never in her principle. Because the principle underneath never changes. Clothing here is for covering the body decently and getting on with the work, never for display. A girl learns to sew before she is grown, and by the time she runs her own household, she can build a dress from bare cloth to finished garment at her own table without a single store-bought pattern. She owns only a few and wears each one until it is worn through. What you buy in an afternoon and forget by spring, she makes by hand and lives in for years. Number 12. The wedding dress is not white, and she may be buried in it. Step into a plain Mennonite wedding, and the first thing you will notice is that there is no white. The bride wears blue, or a deep plain color, in a dress cut almost exactly like the ones she wears every other day of her life. There is no veil, no train, no ring exchanged, and often no party as you would know one. Only a long, plain meal where the whole community is fed. But here is what almost no outsider knows. That dress is not a costume for one afternoon. It becomes her good dress, her Sunday dress, worn to worship for years to come. She sewed it knowing it had to last, so she chose a color and a cloth that would carry her through a decade of Sundays. And in the plainest homes, when her long life is finally over, she is laid to rest in that very dress. The garment she was married in is the garment she is buried in, the two ends of a woman's married life held in a single piece of cloth. There is no gown worn once and sealed in a box in the attic. There is one good dress and an entire lifetime lived inside it. And the wedding itself is a day the whole community pours itself into. There is no caterer and no rented hall. The women of the church cook for hundreds, and at a plain wedding you will often find whole rows of celery grown just for the occasion, cooked and set out on every table, an old quiet tradition that tells the neighbors a wedding is coming long before the date is ever spoken aloud. Here is the thing I need you to sit with before we go further, because this is exactly where a room full of people splits into two. Everything I have described so far, the covering, the uncut hair, the bare face, the plain dress, looks from the outside like a long list of things a woman is forbidden to do. Restrictions. A cage with a woman standing quietly inside it. And I will not pretend to you that these things have never been misused, because people are people in every community that has ever existed, mine included. But that is not how the woman inside experiences her own life, and if the cage is all you can see, you are missing the entire point of her. To her, that covering is closer to a crown she chose than to anything forced on her head. The plainness, in her eyes, is release from a race she simply decided not to run.
You are looking at a woman who has never once lain awake wondering if she was pretty enough, thin enough, young enough, dressed well enough for the room.
And I have to be honest with you, plainly, so that no one hears me wrong. Most Mennonites do not live like this at all. The women in this video are the plain and old order few, a shrinking minority, who know exactly how strange they look to you and made their peace with it generations ago. Keep both of those pictures in your head, the cage and the crown, because you are going to have to choose between them by the end. Number 11, her days are built around the home, not a career. In the plain Mennonite world, a woman's work is centered on her household, and I want to be careful here because the modern ear hears that word and thinks small. It is not small. The labor is enormous, and it would flatten most people who imagine it is easy. She is up before the light. She cooks from raw ingredients for a large family 3 times a day, keeps a garden that would break your back, and cans and preserves through late summer until the cellar shelves are full enough to carry everyone through winter, sews the family's clothing, and cleans a full house without the machines the rest of us lean on. Many of these women also bring in real money, selling quilts, baked goods, produce, or handwork, but they run those trades from the homestead, around the children, never away from them. What you will almost never find is one of them climbing a ladder in an office in town. And the part that genuinely unsettles modern viewers is that most of them do not feel cheated. No one talked them out of ambition. They were raised from the cradle to believe that running a home and raising the next generation of the church is the highest work a person can be given, not the small thing you settle for when the big thing is denied you. Ask one of them whether she would rather spend her days in an office in town, and many will look at you as though you had just asked whether she would rather be someone else entirely. Number 10. The families are large, and children are counted as wealth. In a plain home, you will rarely find 1 child or 2. You will find a long table and a great many chairs pulled up to it. Big families here are neither an accident nor a hardship to be quietly managed. They are understood plainly and without irony as a blessing straight from God. Children are the future of the church and the hands that keep a farm and a household alive. So one of these mothers may spend the larger part of her adult years either carrying a child, nursing one, or raising the ones already underfoot. And the community around her treats that not as an exhaustion to be pitied, but as an honor to be respected, even on the days when it is plainly both at once. The older children help raise the younger ones as a matter of course, so a girl of 10 already knows how to mind a baby and run a kitchen. To a modern world that plans a family carefully down to 1 child or 2, a house spilling over with children can look like chaos or like a burden no woman should carry. To her, a silent house with empty chairs would be the truly sorrowful thing. And these families are how the church itself survives. It does not grow by knocking on doors or winning converts off the street. It grows the slow and certain way, one generation raising up the next, which means a mother of many is running a household and yet at the same time raising the literal future of her whole people, and everyone in the community understands her exactly that way. Number 9. No photographs, no posed portraits. This one is hard for the modern mind to even hold on to. In the most conservative and old-order Mennonite homes, a woman may live her entire life without a single posed photograph of herself. No portraits, no pictures framed on the wall, and being photographed by a curious tourist at a roadside stand is not welcomed and is sometimes quietly resented. It reaches back to the old commandment against graven images and to that same deep suspicion of pride of making any kind of idol out of the human face. Sit with what that means stretched across a whole life. No photograph of her as a young bride. No pictures of herself at any age. When she is gone, there may be no image of her left in the world at all, only the memory carried by the people who loved her, and the things her own hands made, the quilts folded in the chest, the jars still on the cellar shelf, the garden, the children, the grandchildren. Her legacy is a life other people can still reach out and touch, held in memory and in the work of her hands rather than in 1,000 images scrolling on a screen. Now, I will be straight with you because straight talk is the whole point of this channel. This rule is at its strictest among the Old Order, and plenty of less conservative Mennonites do allow a photograph. But in the plainest homes I have ever stood in, the camera was simply never welcome, and no one in the house felt poorer for it. Number 8. The little girls play with faceless dolls. Walk into a plain old order home, look at the doll in the child's arms, and something will feel quietly wrong until you understand it. The doll has no face. Where the eyes and the nose and the mouth should be, there is only smooth, blank cloth. This is not a factory mistake, and it is not meant to unsettle anyone. It comes from the very same command against graven images, the belief that to shape a human face, even a stitched one on a rag doll, reaches towards something that belongs to God alone, who is the only maker of a living face. So the doll is left deliberately blank, sewn at home, dressed in a tiny plain dress and a tiny covering of its own, and the little girl who holds it loves it every bit as fiercely as any child loves any doll. There is a lesson stitched into that blank cloth, and the mother understands it even when the daughter is still too young to. It is that what a person's face looks like was never once the thing that mattered about them. Often that doll was sewn by a grandmother and handed down, dressed and redressed by a line of little girls across the years. And it sits inside a whole childhood that is just as plain, with homemade toys, no screens, and games passed from hand to hand, and so that a plain child learns her earliest lesson long before she could ever name it, that the good things in this life are the ones a person makes. Number 7, the home itself is plain, and there is almost no mirror in it. Step inside and the walls tell you the very same story the dress does. No decoration hung for its own sake, no display, and strikingly few mirrors. Often only a small one kept for the practical work of pinning a covering straight, nothing large enough to study your whole self in. And that leads somewhere most of us have honestly never once thought about. One of these women may never in her entire life have seen herself from head to foot the way you saw yourself in the mirror this morning without a second thought. She does not know what she looks like walking across a room. She has no idea how she photographs because she is never photographed. Her sense of exactly who she is was never assembled out of a reflection at all. It was built out of what her hands can do and how she treats the people around her and whether the work she puts into the world holds up over time. If this is the kind of honest, forgotten history you came here for, do me a favor and tap subscribe, because this is exactly what this channel is for. Now, back to it. Number 6, she does not lead the church, and in the plainest group, she does not vote in it. Here we reach the rules that start the real arguments, so let me just lay it out plainly. In conservative and old order Mennonite churches, the men hold the offices, the minister, the deacon, the bishop. A woman does not preach and does not hold that authority. And in the most conservative groups, when the congregation makes a decision, it is the men who cast the vote. It rests on what my people read as a clear order in Scripture, an order of headship, with the man held answerable before God for the household and the church. Now, there is a detail here that startles outsiders even more than the rule itself. In many of these churches, the ministers are not campaigned for or elected in the way you would expect. When a new minister is needed, the members who are nominated each take a hymnal, and one book holds a slip of paper, and the man who opens to that slip is understood to have been chosen by God through the lot, not by popularity. So no woman rises to that office, but no ambitious man simply seizes it either. And I will tell you the part the outrage usually races right past. These women are not silent inside their own homes or their own community. They run the households, they hold enormous quiet sway, they raise and shape every single member of the next generation, and a great many of them would defend this whole arrangement to your face far more fiercely than any man ever would. Number 5, she promises to submit to her husband as the head of the home, and she means every word of it. This is the rule that sets a comment section on fire. So I am going to say it as plainly as I know how, and then let you do with it whatever you will. On her wedding day, a plain Mennonite woman vows to submit to her husband. and that is not a quaint old line left in a ceremony for tradition's sake. It is understood as a daily practice for the rest. In the places where a modern couple would negotiate and meet in the middle, she is expected, when it truly comes down to it, to yield to her husband's judgment as the head of the home. You may not want to hear that from a man sitting on your screen, and I understand exactly why. But you would hear the very same thing, often said harder and with less apology, from the women who actually live it. And here is the piece the internet almost always leaves out. In this world, a husband's headship is meant to describe a man who answers for her, who carries the final weight and the final blame, who is bound by the same scripture to love his wife as his own body or stand condemned before God for failing her. Whether that is a beautiful covenant or an unequal cage is precisely the argument, and it is a very old one. Stop right here for a moment, because this is the fork in the road, and I can already feel the room dividing down the middle. Half of you are watching a woman quietly erased, told to cover herself, cut nothing, want nothing, own no reflection, and obey. The other half are watching a woman who has been handed the exact thing the modern world quietly misplaced: a settled place, a certain role, a life free of the endless, exhausting question of who she is supposed to become this year. Both of those are honest ways to see the same woman, and both of them are old. People have fought over this precise question since the first Anabaptists were hunted, drowned, and burned for their faith 500 years ago, and out of the answer they chose, they built a whole enduring people. So before you type the comment, you are already halfway through writing in your head. Be honest with yourself about which of those two women you actually see when you look at her, because that answer very likely says as much about you as it does about her. Number 4, her courtship was plain, watched, and always inside the faith. Long before there was ever a wedding dress, there was a courtship, and it looked almost nothing like the modern one. A plain young woman does not date widely and does not date in private. Courtship is expected to stay within the faith, to be known to both families from the start, and to move toward marriage as its plain and obvious purpose, not as one option among 100 others. Young people meet at gatherings the community can see, the Sunday singings where the unmarried come together to sing and to be seen by families who are quietly paying attention. There is little going off alone, and little of the long, modern search through stranger after stranger. When a couple is ready, the match is one both families can stand behind, and the whole community turns toward the wedding. To a world of apps and infinite options, that can sound suffocating, like a choice made for her. But ask the plain woman what she makes of a world where people swipe past 1,000 faces and still cannot find a single one to keep and grow old beside, and she may quietly believe she got the better end of the bargain. When a match is finally settled, the couple is often published in church. Their intention to marry announced before the whole congregation so that everyone is holding them to it from that day forward. And there is no lavish honeymoon waiting at the end of the wedding either. A newly married plain couple often spends their first week simply visiting relatives, going house to house, being welcomed into the family they have both now joined. Number 3, the screen that runs the rest of our lives is not in her house. In the old order Mennonite home, the television that raised the modern world is simply not there. The radio is kept out. And the smartphone that most of us can no longer set down for an hour has no seat at her table. In many communities, there is not even a telephone inside the house at all, only a shared phone shanty out at the end of the lane. A little wooden booth the families walk to when a call has to be made, so that the outside world never gets to ring its way straight into the middle of supper. Think about everything that quietly removes from a woman's day. No feed telling her she is too old, too plain, too poor, too far behind everyone else. No endless stream of other people's carefully staged and edited lives held up beside her own unedited one. Her attention belongs all day to the people actually in the room with her, because nothing in her hand is fighting them for it. We now spend fortunes and sit through courses and retreats trying to buy back exactly that, the quiet, the presence, the undivided evening. In her house, it was simply never sold off to begin with. Number 2, singing has no instruments, and it may be the most beautiful thing you have never heard. When one of these congregations worships, there is no piano, no guitar, no band, no recording. There is only the human voice. For many Mennonite groups, that means many voices woven together into rich 4-part harmony with not a single instrument, and in the oldest orders it is different again, slow and ancient, and sung in unison from a hymnal called the Ausbund, one of the oldest songbooks still in use by anyone anywhere on earth, carrying tunes and words handed down from the days of the martyrs themselves. The reason is the same thread that runs through every rule on this list. An instrument can perform, can show a single player off. A voice lifted with the whole congregation cannot, because no one soul is ever meant to stand out above the sound. A woman raised in this has sung this way since she was a small child on her mother's lap. And if you ever have the chance to stand in a plain meeting house while 100 unaccompanied voices rise together on an old tune, you will understand something about these people in 30 seconds that this entire list of rules could never quite teach you. Many of these women carry their part in that harmony without ever having read a single note of written music, having learned the whole of it by ear from their mother in the very same way their mother once learned it from hers. Number 1, the rule beneath all the rules is called Gelassenheit, the yielding of the self. At the very top of this list is not a rule about hair or dress or cameras, because every one of those is only a branch. This is the root the whole tree grows out of. People have a word for it, Gelassenheit, and it does not cross into English cleanly, but it means something close to yieldedness, a deliberate laying down of your own will. Submission to God first, then to the community, and underneath both, a quiet refusal to make yourself the center of everything. The uncut hair, the bare face, the large family, the yielding in marriage, the singing where no one is meant to stand out, every branch on this list grows straight up out of that single root. The belief is that the surrendered life is the free one, and that a person who insists on being the center of her own world was never actually free to begin with, only standing alone in the middle of it. You do not have to agree with one word of that, but you cannot truly understand these women until you understand this. The self they were supposed to guard was never taken from them. They set it down themselves, on purpose and with both hands, and they call what remains peace. So here is what I will leave you with. Before you decide once and for all what these women are, picture just one of them honestly. She has never cut her hair. She has never worn a ring. She has never seen her own face full length. She has never cast a vote in her own church, and she has never once in her whole long life been the center of attention in a room. Now answer the real question, the one this entire video has quietly been asking you from the start. Is that a woman who was robbed of a self? Or a woman who was handed the very peace, and the rest of us are still paying good money to strangers to help us find? Some of you already know your answer, and it is the exact opposite of the person watching this right beside you. Tell me in the comments which woman you see, and be honest about it, because these were never really rules about hair or cloth or cameras at all. They were a whole people deciding, quietly, generation after generation, that the self is simply not the most important thing a person owns. And a woman who truly believes that down to the bone carries a kind of quiet the rest of us have very nearly forgotten how to hear.